Humanity had expected many things from the dark between stars: silence, mystery, perhaps even wonder, but never the merciless certainty of something that regarded them as prey. The Kargothi Dominion entered Seoul without a message, a claim, or a single gesture of negotiation. Their living warbeasts drifted across the heliopause like vast, silent predators, and every government from Earth to the Jovian colonies understood that no warning would come. What followed was fear, broadcasts crackling with panic, orbital authorities scrambling to raise defensive shields that had never been tested against such monstrous shapes. And while leaders debated the scale of the catastrophe approaching, one name cut through the noise: General Kael. Kael's reputation preceded him like the front edge of a storm. Soldiers who had served under him spoke of a man carved from iron, shaped more by war than by any human softness. He was tall, sharp-featured, unmovable in presence, and completely intolerant of uncertainty. His command philosophy favored cold logic over political comfort, and every recorded battle under his leadership had ended with the enemy broken long before Kael ever was. When High Command transferred full strategic authority to him, not a single voice rose in protest. They needed someone who did not flinch. They needed someone who would see the invasion clearly, without fear, without illusion. On board the Command Dreadnought Valkyrian, Kael stood before a wide tactical display projecting the silhouettes of the incoming Leviathans. Each creature pulsed with a harsh bioluminescence, signatures collected from early reconnaissance drones that had only managed seconds of recording before being torn apart. Colonel Ren Vargon stood at Kael's side, his posture rigid despite the unease that flickered across his expression. Vargon was one of Kael's most competent officers, a veteran whose loyalty was earned through blood and consequence, not rank alone. Even now, though, the alien shapes unsettled him. "They aren't machines," Vargon said quietly. "It's like watching an ecosystem drifting toward us with deliberate intent." Kael did not blink as he studied the creature's movement patterns. Intent doesn't require language. These organisms were engineered for one purpose. And purpose is far more dangerous than anger. Across the Valkyrian, officers whispered about the invasion scale. They compared the Leviathan sizes to cities. They speculated that Earth's orbital defenses would buckle within the first hour if even one creature reached firing range. Kael silenced such discussions immediately. Fear served no function. Only precision mattered now. Instead of issuing reactive orders, Kael demanded data. Every energy fluctuation, every radiation plume, every muscular contraction within the Leviathan's wings. He calculated trajectories, acceleration patterns, and the thermal signatures preceding their known methods of attack. Nothing escaped his attention. Where others saw monstrosities, Kael searched for predictable behavior. Weakness. Leverage. He found it. One of the Leviathans, larger than the rest, shifted its spinal ridges in a sequence he recognized, a pattern indicating a pre-firing charge. The creature's energy buildup did not align with the others, forming an asymmetry in the swarm's advance. It revealed something crucial. These organisms did not act as individuals, but as components of a single coordinated intelligence. If one could be baited into overcommitting its charge, the chain reaction would ripple across the entire formation. Vargon noticed Kael's expression sharpen. "You've seen something." "I've seen enough," Kael replied. "This is not their full force. This is reconnaissance through annihilation. They're testing how we die." "And what do you intend to show them?" "How we answer." Kael's plan formed quickly, shaped by the brutal clarity that defined his command. Humanity could not outrun these creatures, nor survive a frontal engagement. But if the Leviathans relied on synchronized energy patterns to fire their plasma spines, then Kael could exploit that synchronicity. He ordered a network of graviton inversion fields to be positioned along the predicted firing arcs, delicate, immovable traps designed to reflect the creature's own attacks back into their bodies. Earth scientists had built such technology for planetary defense, not for orchestrating biological implosions, but Kael saw no distinction between tool and purpose. If it worked, it would turn the Kargothi's evolutionary advantage into a fatal flaw. While preparations unfolded, Kael walked the bridge with a measured calm that anchored the crew. Soldiers straightened when he passed, not because he demanded obedience, but because presence alone commanded it. Every officer felt it, the strange confidence that came from serving under someone who seemed utterly incapable of failure. Some found it inspiring. Others found it terrifying. The Leviathans drew closer, their silhouettes swelling until their shadows blanketed sensor grids. Vargon stepped to Kane's side again. Their formation is tightening. If we're wrong, we're not wrong. I'm aware, sir, Vargon said, exhaling slowly. I just want to hear you say it. Kael met his eyes, steady as bedrock. Then hear this. They came in silence, so we answer in silence. No warnings, no posturing, no negotiation. We strike first. We strike decisively. We strike without sound. The last words seemed to settle over the bridge like dust. Officers turned back to their stations with renewed focus. Fear dulled. Determination sharpened. Kael returned his gaze to the tactical screen, watching the Leviathans cross the final threshold. Their wings unfolded. Their spines glowed. Their weapons primed. Kael issued one final order. Hold until they commit. The pause stretched thin, humming with tension. And then it happened. The first Leviathan initiated its firing sequence, triggering the synchronized buildup across the swarm. Heat signatures flared. Plasma compressed within living chambers. Power surged along biological conduits. Kael raised his hand. Now. The Valkyrian systems obeyed instantly, unleashing the inversion fields in perfect harmony. A silent wave rippled across space, invisible to the eye but brutal in effect. Whatever followed would define the fate of two species, and Kael did not allow himself a single moment of doubt. The battle had not yet begun, but its outcome had already taken shape. And Aurelius Kael intended to carve it into the bones of history. The first Leviathan died without releasing a sound. Its plasma spine, meant to carve through human warships like an incandescent spear, folded back on itself as the graviton inversion web caught the discharge. The reflected energy slammed into the creature's own firing canal, rupturing organs the size of small cities. The beast tore apart in a blossom of violet flame, fragments drifting across the void like burning scales. On the Valkyrians' bridge, no one cheered. They simply watched the remaining Leviathans convulse in shock as the synchronized firing pattern backfired catastrophically. General Aurelius Kael stood motionless, his expression unreadable. The destruction of the first warbeast confirmed what he had calculated. The Kargothi relied on rigid biological patterns, unable to deviate quickly enough to counter the sudden inversion. But though the chain reaction consumed several more Leviathans, 3 massive creatures resisted the feedback. Their exoskeletal plates twisted, hardening into reflective ridges that dampened the returning energy. Adaptation, swift and dangerous, ran through their forms. Colonel Ren Vargon tracked the surviving Leviathans' trajectories. They're correcting. Whatever the Dominion bred into them, it's learning from our trap. Kael's eyes narrowed. Then we stopped teaching. The damaged Leviathans abandoned synchronized firing and shifted into attack formation. One unfurled vast cartilage wings and propelled itself toward the nearest human cruiser. The creature's acceleration distorted sensor readings, and before the ship could evade, the Leviathan's wing blades sliced through its hull. The vessel imploded, scattering metal shrapnel into Mars' orbit. Another Leviathan opened pulsating glands lining its throat and released a cloud of biomines. The spheres radiated with corrosive enzymes, seeking metallic surfaces with predatory attraction. Human ships scattered to avoid the drifting swarm. Deploy the Shade Swarm, Kael commanded. A ventral hatch on the Valkyrian unsealed with silent precision. From within, a cloud of sleek black drones burst outward. They spiraled into formation, moving with algorithmic grace. Microlasers lanced through the biomines, fragmenting them into dissolving chemical vapor. The drones swept through the debris field in a synchronized wave, ensuring no spore reached a human hull. The third Leviathan, the largest, did not attack immediately. It loomed at the rear of the formation, its cavernous maw crackling with stellar plasma. Vargon recognized its scale and trembled. A siege sire. They usually lead whole war clusters. We shouldn't be seeing one here. That means this is no scouting force, Kael replied. It's the opening act. The siege sire reared back, gathering enough energy to pierce a planetary shield. Its wings beat once, generating gravitational distortion that destabilized nearby ships. The Valkyrian stabilizers strained, metal groaning under the stress. Kael stepped forward. Onega array. Target its thorax. Engineers executed the command without hesitation. The dorsal spine of the dreadnought unfolded like a mechanical flower, exposing a weapon forbidden by treaty and feared by Kael's predecessors. A graviton bolt surged at its core, swirling with controlled instability. Vargon glanced at Kael. If our timing is off, it won't be. The siege sire unleashed a blast of plasma so bright it bathed Mars in a false dawn. Kael did not blink. He waited for the precise moment when the creature's wing beats created a dip in gravitational flux, one tiny, predictable pattern in its colossal physiology. Fire. The graviton bolt shot forward, a ripple of space-warping force. It struck the siege sire directly beneath its chest plates. The creature's exoskeleton buckled inward, organs imploding under impossible pressure. For a moment the Leviathan writhed, glowing with inner fire as its systems collapsed, then it erupted in a superheated explosion that vaporized its spawnlings nearby. Silence returned to the bridge. Human losses scrolled across the tactical screen. Dozens of vessels destroyed or crippled, hundreds of crewmen gone. But the Kargathi assault had been broken. Mars spun below, untouched by the horrors that might have rained down upon it. Yet Kael did not allow the crew a breath of relief. This was not their invasion, he said. His voice carried no triumph, only a grim certainty. This was their instrument measuring our thresholds. Vargon looked up sharply. You're saying they expected defeat? They expected data. Kael tapped the display, highlighting faint subspace signatures hidden within the debris field. Their final transmission wasn't a distress call. It was a report. The implication chilled the officers. The Kargathi weren't retreating, they were recalibrating. Kael straightened. Trace the jump wake left by their signal. It leads to their staging world. No human fleet has ever crossed that far into unknown space, Vargon warned. That is why we must. If we wait for their true war host, humanity dies. The crew exchanged glances. To pursue the Dominion into its own territory was beyond reckless. It bordered on suicidal. But no one voiced resistance. Kael had earned obedience through clarity and results, not threats. He turned to the navigation officer. Prepare coordinates. We follow their trail at once. And when we reach their world? Vargon asked. Kael's answer was measured, final. We silence the Dominion completely. The lights dimmed as the Valkyrians' engines prepared for a long-range jump. Officers moved to stations with new urgency, understanding the war had just shifted from defense to preemptive annihilation. As the dreadnought surged forward and the stars stretched into thin white threads, Vargon allowed himself a single glimpse toward Kael. He saw no fear, no hesitation, only resolve crystallized into something unbreakable. Whatever awaited them beyond human maps, Kael intended to meet it without flinching. And the universe, vast and indifferent, seemed to brace itself for the reach of the Iron General. Below is Section 3, written in a tight, forward-driving narrative under 1,000 words, with no headings, no extraneous elements, and focused on deepening the central conflict and character dynamics. The courier drones drifted across the command spire like silent insects, dropping fresh tactical holos in front of General Kael as if trying to provoke a reaction. He barely blinked. Every update told him the same story. The enemy had not relented, not paused, not reconsidered their attempts to breach the outer cordon. It was as though the invaders believed relentless pressure alone would make humanity crack. They didn't understand that Kael had been forged in a crucible far harsher than any siege they could muster. He leaned forward, studying the latest enemy formation shift. Their lines were coiling inward, tightening like a noose. It hinted at desperation, But desperation could be dangerous. Cornered foes often found reckless courage. Kael whispered a quiet calculation, running probabilities in his head faster than the fleet's auxiliary AI. The enemy's new vector put Commander Ren's division directly in harm's path. Kael toggled the communication line, bracing for the man's familiar defiance. Ren answered instantly, breathless, as though he had run from one end of his command deck to the other. "If you're calling to tell me to fall back again, sir," he said, "we're still holding. Barely, but holding." Kael's voice remained composed. "They're preparing a converging strike. Your flank will be the first target. You have 15 minutes before pressure triples." Ren cursed under his breath. "We don't have the barriers recharged yet. And you know what morale looks like down here." He paused, then added with a bitter laugh, "You should see them, sir. These men, they believe you'll do something impossible again." Kael didn't respond to the comment. Whether or not he intended to perform any miracles depended entirely on what the calculations demanded. But he knew one thing. Ren's men were exhausted, and exhausted soldiers made fatal mistakes. "You will receive reinforcements," Kael said finally. "From where?" "You've stripped every—" "Not troops," Kael interrupted. "A breaker unit." There was a long silence before Ren breathed out in disbelief. "Sir, that will collapse the entire basin." "It will collapse the enemy," Kael corrected. "And if we wait, the enemy will collapse your line." Kael could almost feel Ren wrestling with his conscience, trying to decide whether the cost of survival was worth the devastation. But war rarely offered clean choices, and Kael had long since stopped seeking them. At last, Ren spoke, voice grim. "Then send the breaker. And may the ground forgive us." Kael closed the channel and activated the deployment authorization. A deep rumble vibrated through the command spire as the breaker platform detached, its gravitational core humming like a restrained storm. Marshal Dorian stepped into the room just as the confirmation lights flickered. He looked older than he had only hours ago, his beard streaked with silver from fatigue rather than age. "You're escalating," he said quietly, folding his arms as he approached. "You know what the council will say." "I know what the enemy is saying," Kael answered. "With every shot they fire, with every civilian they corner, they're telling us they want a war without restraint. If that's the theater they choose, then restraint becomes a liability." Dorian studied him, searching Kael's expression for something, doubt, regret, or perhaps even fear. But Kael's face was unreadable, carved from the same resolve that had carried humanity through darker conflicts. That was what unsettled Dorian. He respected Kael, but he feared the cold logic guiding him even more. "There's no turning back after this," Dorian warned. "There hasn't been turning back since the first strike on our colonies," Kael replied. "We are only now matching the tone they set." Before Dorian could argue further, a tremor rippled through the floor. Moments later, a shockwave icon flashed across the hollow displays. The breaker had fired. Kael zoomed in on the basin's topology. Where once there had been enemy battalions entrenched in fortified ridges, there was now a spreading crater, glowing faintly as dust rose like a funeral shroud. Their formation shattered, scattering in disarray. The path to Ren's flank was no longer a spear aimed at the heart of humanity, but a ruined scar incapable of supporting any further assault. Ren's voice crackled through seconds later, harsh and raw. "It worked," he said. "Gods, Kael, it worked. They're falling back, actually falling back. My men are shouting your name like it's a battle hymn." Kael allowed himself a single breath of relief, though his expression remained controlled. Victory never came without a shadow, and he could already feel its presence creeping along the edges of the moment. "Hold your position," he instructed. "The enemy will retaliate. They won't accept this humiliation quietly." Dorian took a step closer, lowering his voice. "They're going to escalate too. You know that, don't you?" Kael nodded once, eyes fixed on the shifting icons of the battlefield. "That is the expectation." He paused, fingers tightening behind his back. "But this time, when they escalate, we will be prepared." A distant alarm pulsed through the spire, 3 sharp tones that signaled a new incoming threat vector. Kael's posture straightened, his mind already moving to the next series of contingencies. The moment of triumph was over. The real war, the one he had been preparing for beneath every strategic decision, was waking. Dorian exhaled heavily. "You've set a precedent today." Kael glanced at him, voice low but unwavering. "They wanted war. I'm giving them the shape of its consequence." Outside the command spire, the stars flickered with movement as enemy ships realigned, their patterns growing erratic and dangerous. Something significant was coming. Kael felt it, a tension like approaching thunder, a shift in the air that heralded a new stage of the conflict. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, centering himself. Then he opened them again, gaze sharp, unyielding. "Prepare all divisions," he said. "The next strike won't be one we can meet with half measures." And as the alarms intensified, the future drew itself into a narrow, brutal horizon, waiting for the Iron General to decide how far he was willing to go. "If you want Section 4 next, just tell me." Below is Section 4, written with tight narrative focus, male characters only, under 1,000 words, and serving as a powerful concluding section that still invites continuation. No headings. The enemy fleet arrived without ceremony, bleeding into normal space like shadows stepping out of a wall. Their vessels drifted in disciplined rows, each shaped with the sharp, predatory geometry of a species that had never learned to coexist. Kael watched them materialize one after another, his expression unreadable, though a quiet shift in his posture suggested the gravity of this moment. This was no probing incursion. This was the axis upon which the war would finally turn. Marshal Dorian stood beside him, jaw clenched as fresh data cascaded across the tactical sphere. 70 vessels confirmed, possibly more behind the Veil field. His voice carried the weight of every campaign he had survived, but beneath it lingered something rarer: fear. "This is their extinction fleet." Kael nodded. He had expected this response the moment he authorized the breaker strike. For the enemy, humiliation was intolerable. Retaliation was doctrine. Still, the scale of the approaching armada spoke of a finality he had not fully anticipated. Commander Wren's voice cut into the channel, taut and strained. "General, if that formation is accurate, we won't hold the outer ring for more than 10 minutes. "You won't need to," Kael answered calmly. "Begin fallback protocol, Theta. Draw them inward. Make them commit fully." There was a sharp intake of breath. "Theta collapses half our positions. You're asking us to abandon." "I am asking you to survive long enough for this war to end," Kael said, his tone sharpening for the first time. Wren fell silent, and when he spoke again, it was with a steady acceptance. "Understood. Initiating Theta." Dorian turned to Kael, confusion slicing through his stern demeanor. "You're pulling back everything. Every satellite, every perimeter gun, every forward outpost." "Kael, what are you planning?" Kael tapped a sequence on the console. Several deep red command locks appeared, awaiting confirmation. "A war they wanted," he murmured. "So, a war they will receive." Then he opened a secure channel that only 3 humans in the entire fleet had access to. "Arc Protocol 7, Kael said. Dorian inhaled sharply, eyes widening. "You can't mean, Kael, that protocol was never meant to be used. It's a contingency, not a plan." "It is the only option that ends us tonight," Kael replied, voice steady. "You said it yourself, their extinction fleet is here. And if we fight them conventionally, humanity will bleed itself dry before the month ends." Dorian's voice cracked with disbelief. "You're talking about an entire system burn. You'll annihilate every ship, every colony husk, every outpost we ever built in this sector." Kael finally met his gaze, eyes cold and resolute. "We abandoned those assets the minute their main fleet crossed the border. All that remains here is a stage for the final act." Dorian stepped back, running a trembling hand through his beard. "You've already decided." "I decided the moment they struck our outer colonies. The moment they refused communication. The moment they spoke only in bombardments." Kael's voice softened, not with mercy, but with final certainty. "This war ends today." Across the field, The enemy fleet surged forward like a storm tide. Their weapons lit the darkness with violent arcs of energy, hammering through the shrinking human perimeter. Ren's division retreated with mechanical precision, losing ground but holding cohesion. Kael watched their markers fall back, each movement calculated, each sacrifice accounted for. A calm channel flickered open. Ren again, but this time his voice carried a quiet steadiness, the kind born in men who understood the cost of survival. We've reached the inner ring. If this is the last stand, sir, it's been an honor. It isn't a last stand, Kael replied. It's a doorway. He entered the final authorization. Alarms cascaded through the spire as dormant constructs awakened throughout the system. Orbital plates rotated, massive engines humming to life. The star at the system's center flared unnaturally, as if stirred by some unseen hand. Dorian stared at the readings, horror creeping across his face. You're triggering the compression net. Kael, this will collapse the entire well. You'll turn the system into a gravitational implosion. That is the intention, Kael said. The enemy wants humanity silenced. Instead, they will be the ones who vanish, quietly, instantly, without the dignity of remembrance. Outside, the enemy fleet sensed the shift too late. Their formations wavered. Their ships began to pull back, but the gravity well had already begun to distort, collapsing inward with a slow, inevitable hunger. Kael opened a final channel to Ren and the evacuation craft. All human vessels, jump now. Ren's voice echoed through the line, steady as steel. Jumping. See you on the other side, General. One by one, human ships vanished into slipspace, streaking away from the doomed system. Kael waited until the last vessel disappeared from the grid. Only then did he speak. Begin the collapse. The system answered with blinding silence. Light folded, matter crumpled, and the enemy fleet, once an unstoppable armada, was drawn into a singular, devouring point. There were no explosions, no triumphant visuals, only the quiet erasure of everything that had stepped into humanity's path. When the last sensor flickered out, Kael released a slow breath. Victory had never tasted like triumph. It tasted like necessity. Dorian lowered himself into a chair, shoulders sagging. You ended an entire enemy civilization in minutes. Kael's voice was barely above a whisper.
No.
I ended a war. What remains of their civilization? The ones who did not come with this fleet will have a choice now. They can approach us with peace, he paused, eyes dark. Or they can disappear just as quietly. Silence draped the command spire. A new future waited at its edges, undefined and dangerous. Kael stared into the void where a system had once been. They wanted war, he said softly. I gave them extinction wrapped in silence.